Hey, everybody, welcome back to CANswers, the podcast about the modern cancer journey. And we're really centered on Cancer Alley right now as one of our forefronts of what is happening in our country and what is happening to a lot of us that have cancers. I'm your host, Eric Crown, and I'm a filmmaker as well as a cancer patient since 2005 when I was diagnosed with a very rare environmental cancer. Since then, it's been surgery after surgery, chemo, radiation. There have been so many attempts as the doctors try to figure out exactly what kind of cancer it is that I've been through. And unfortunately for me, the cancer is not going away, but it is manageable. So in that way, I consider myself very lucky. But today, what we wanted to do is talk a little bit about what's happening in Cancer Alley, because right now there is a legal showdown between Louisiana and the EPA, and it illustrates exactly the problem of Cancer Alley, the problem of environmental cancers, and the problem. I think it really shows how the problem continues, and it's one of the most amazing examples. And it actually takes place somewhere where Sierra and I spent quite a bit of time down in New Orleans. First, I wanted to say thank you to everybody for all of the support so far for our Indiegogo campaign. We are working really hard to raise enough money to ensure that we can put all the final elements into place and put the movie out on the market. And the movie will be on the market before spring of next year. We are pushing, pushing, pushing. The story needs to get out. It needs to be told. And we are surprised that there's never been a feature film about Cancer Alley. There's a lot of short films, but we know now why, and we'll talk about that on another podcast. The legal fear and the journalistic fear that keeps most people away from speaking on the topic, not to mention the advertising money and other constraints that keep the story from ever seeing light. But this story has gotten actually a lot of attention now. So for everybody tuning in, if you're not familiar with Cancer Alley is an 85-mile stretch on the Mississippi between New Orleans and Baton Rouge. And it is just dotted with petrochemical companies, refineries, all kinds of different cancer-causing, polluting industry. And there's over 150. We were seeing anywhere from 150 to 200 chemical plants there. So what's happening is there's one that makes a synthetic rubber, and it is called Denka. Now, Denka is bought DuPont's old facility down there. Now, this is the only place in America that makes synthetic rubber. So this also brings back into play the question of our Western market needs being balanced with our health needs and our environmental needs. So what's happening is they have this. Okay, well, let's just talk about him in a second. First of all, Louisiana has said we'll shut down if the EPA emissions deadline isn't relaxed. What is happening is the EPA has been trying to get Denka to get into an acceptable limit that is not too cancerous, and an acceptable limit. They have, and this has been a dance that's been going on for a long time. And we're going to show you some of the research and some of the numbers. We were actually there, and it's in the movie. This is actually one of the facilities we spend quite a bit of time looking at in the movie. So the EPA said you have 90 days to get into compliance, and their response is, well, we're going to shut down. Now, it even gets a little crazier. Now you enter in Landry. Now, Landry is the new governor, and he is very pro-oil. And he actually stepped up. He went and did a press conference at Denka to stand by them and say, we stand by you. We're not going to let this happen. This is the Louisiana Illuminator, and you can see in this article, there's two interesting things about this article. Governor Landry accuses EPA of trying to close Denka plant. So that is a weird twist, right? It's like they're accusing the EPA of going, I want to shut this business. I want this business out of business. When in fact, it's really about compliance with the Clean Air Act. And that's about it. And we'll show a little bit more. And also the other thing about this picture, if you notice, there's cows. And one thing we cover in the movie that we'll talk about right now is these plants actually will rent out their there's space that's green for agriculture. So a lot of people do not eat beef or drink milk in these areas because these animals are um, all the carcinogens are going into them, and all the carcinogens from the air are falling into water and the grass, and the cows are eating that. So you would it just seems like a really terrible idea to have your food supply, if that that's how they consider that, next to what we know is giving everybody cancer. It's just not very smart. So real fast before we go on, I just wanted to show you how cozy the relationship is between Governor Landry and the oil and gas industry. This is a little 40-second clip, but it's going to give you an idea of the true opposition that everybody in Cancer Alley faces to being heard, and to being not only heard, but to have a voice, to be allowed to have a place at the table when there's decisions that are made about their own communities. Well, this will be an interesting way for you to meet this kid.
Covering Louisiana, Governor Jeff Landry has announced a major economic boost to Chevron. Speaking at an Oil and Gas Association meeting downtown in New Orleans, Landry said the state will take millions of dollars that was earmarked for affordable housing under the Edwards administration and instead use it for Chevron to expand its diesel plant in Geismar.
We had $83 million left over that we had to get out the door right away, and y'all are getting it.
The governor also said Chevron will get an additional $17 million in the state's next bond allocation.
So there we go. So that money dedicated for housing was actually just given to the oil industry. So Landry is 100% oil shill, right? Like his campaign money comes from there. He's down there destroying all of the advancements everybody's been making. So it's very unusual, for a state to take this kind of a stance and go down there and say, you know what, we're gonna put an injunction against this. So right now it's at a legal battle between the EPA. The courts are mandating that they must meet this 90-day deadline. Denka says, we can't do it. We can't do it. We can't do it. We're going to show you right now why we know they can't do it, but also why they know they can't do it, because they're finally being forced to do it. So first of all, let me just show you here. This is a map image. This is Google Maps, and you can see Denka right there to the right. And it's a pretty big facility. And then they're very small. It's about maybe 500 feet or so to the very first street there, which is East 31st Street. And you're going to see an X. Now that X is Fifth Ward Elementary School. This school, the EPA recommended be shut down due to the amount of chloroprene that the children are exposed to. And look at this. This is an elementary school right next to a facility. Let me get this. This one's even closer. I just really want you to take a look at this, because their air, their output of chloroprene can go very far. And these kids are playing. These kids are playing at recess, and they're outdoors, and they're being exposed to this. And one thing that we discovered too is that chloroprene hangs low to the ground, which means it's going through their air conditioner units in school, and it's also right there at their gym equipment and right there where they play all the time. So the children are being poisoned every day. Now, here's the way that we know this for sure. So when we went there, we got to meet up with Wilma Subra, who runs, she's a technical advisor for LEAN, Louisiana Environmental Action Network. What they do is take all the data that comes in, all the data, and crunches it down and helps smaller communities understand all this complex data and how they can fight back on the local level by going to mostly permit meetings. Again, as we talked about in previous ones, you have the federal, then you have your state, then you have your county, and all of those are places where you can interject as a citizen and have your voice heard. So we went with Wilma, and we were there, and we saw there are what are called continuous air monitoring stations. And these are put up by the EPA, and they even put a fence around them, and you'll see them in the movie. We go into a lot of detail with this, but if you take a look here at this map, you will see Denka, as we just showed you on the map before. Now, the bottom left is where the elementary school is, where the 12.6. So what you're looking at right now is the EPA has placed um, what do you call it? Oh my gosh, I can't remember the word right now. They've placed not a limit, but an advisory that the amount of chloroprene that is detected should not go over 0.2. Okay, 0.2. Now, the easiest way to check that now, if you look to the left, you'll see that the elementary school parking lot continuous monitoring shows 12.6. And on River Road, right next to Denka, is 10.8. Far away, where nobody is housed, it's 2.4. So the developments immediately to the left of Denka are the ones that are fighting Denka and trying to force them to go with this number, with 0.2. Now, the EPA, so anyway, this is still way out of line of the Clean Air Act. So the EPA has been saying, you need to fix this, you need to adjust this, you need to bring it down. And Denka has reduced their emissions quite a lot over the last few years. We do have to give them that credit that they have been doing that, but it is not nearly enough. And the problem is they keep going to court to say, we don't want to be constrained by this 0.2. Was it micrograms per meter cubed? We don't want that. We want to be able to, we need to do what we need to do. Now, when you think about the amount of chloroplane that's coming out, there's no way. These are out of smokestacks, and these are air plumes, which can travel for miles and have very long half-lives. So they can't really even fully determine where the plume affects and reaches and what the exact concentration is. But we do know for a fact that instead of 0.02, sorry, no, 0.2. Instead of 0.2, it is 12.6. So right there is proof by the EPA that these children are getting, 100 times more chloroprene than they should. And it's affecting everybody around them, So it's a really interesting battle right now because EPA, this is about the Clean Air Act. And these are national standards. These are things that all companies should have to go into line with. Well, the companies say, look, we're doing our best, but we really can't do it. So I think, it's an interesting thing. And I would love to see what everybody else thinks about this as well, because it comes into regulation versus deregulation. And not only that, but enforcement of any particular regulations. Now, mostly when they're above the regulations, they simply pay a fine and then they move on. And so, this is what we have here is a battle between, okay, you need to follow and comply with the law. And they say, we're not, we need an exemption from the law because what we do is so important. And if you don't think so, we will leave. It's kind of weird. It's sort of like the response of a 7-year-old. But what the battle is going to be is, will Louisiana defend the polluters and ignore the cancer patients and the people that are speaking out, trying to stop this? Or will the EPA mandate that company to come into compliance? And if you had a company that simply could not go into compliance, say it was a small restaurant or like a food cart, and the food inspector came by and you failed, you're going to probably treat it differently than Denka is. So Denka is not a victim in this circumstance, but they are taking it up a notch. So it's going to be very interesting. We have a very pro oil and gas governor, Landry, who, as you saw in the clip, is really on that side and won't once talk about environmental cancers. As a matter of fact, Landry sued the EPA to get the names of all the journalists and people that had tried to access information about any of the companies in Louisiana. So they're very aggressively fighting to keep the story hidden, and to keep the story the way that they're rolling, and to keep whoever's paying his bills very happy. So we don't know what's going to happen. We have well, maybe another close to 80 days to find out what's going to be the next step. Now, how do people feel in Cancer Alley? Sharon Levine said, let them shut down. And I think that is echoed by a lot of people that are down there because they're not getting any economic prosperity from it. They're not getting any jobs from it. As Mary Hampton says, and she lives right next to Denka, the only thing the communities are getting out of these plants is emissions. So that's it, emissions and cancer. And it is not in any way good neighbor. And, not to mention Denka and Dupont, these plants have been around not that long. The amount of destruction and cancer rates that have changed since the plants have come into existence around these areas is terrifying. And not only that, they're trying to bring a bunch of more in. So there's a huge issue right now. Mitsubishi's trying to bring another plant in. They're trying to bring in grain elevators. There are a lot of community organizations fighting, a lot of massive multi-billion-dollar corporations, and a lot of times they're winning. So check out this story. Keep an eye on it. It is really an incredible moment because here we now finally have the EPA and one of the companies going at it, determining if they will follow regulations. It's all about, we don't want to do this in the time you gave it to us. So they really don't get an opportunity to, to normally see this play out in open field. So this is going to be very, very interesting. And I know the residents were very upset that Landry went and, went and did his press conference at Denka, supported Denka, and supported these facilities. They are a lot of the lawmakers are coming out the woodwork to support Denka against the EPA. So we're entering a new time. We're entering a new time where there is too much gray area that these companies are exploiting. And as they figure out what the gray area means, people are dying and people are getting cancer. This is what we have to stop. And this is another example of, we all know that this plant is giving everybody cancer. You can look at the numbers. You can look at the carcinogens. You can look at what's happening there. You can look at the rates of cancer and you can see what's happening, but nobody wants to admit it, the profits from it. So it's an age-old story, and it's one that is changing because the people's voice is being heard more and more all the time. So if you're down there, check it out. Check out any local organizations, or if you're not sure which ones, let us know, and we can direct you to the local organizations that are fighting right now to try to get Denka in place and try to get Denka in compliance and to stop poisoning all the neighbors. And that is really what the residents want. So thank you for joining us today. Today has been a really interesting, I can't wait to see how this plays out. This is going to have a huge impact on the attitude moving forward and how Cancer Alley is dealt with, I think, by the state especially. So, excuse me. Anyway, thank you guys for joining today. I always love the opportunity to come here, speak to the cancer community, talk to everybody about what's happening. We're going to keep updating you on other advancements in Cancer Alley news, talk about more people happening down there, education on some of the different chemicals that the people are exposed to, and just really try to keep this story up, especially in the election cycle right now, where more than ever, politicians are pretending to listen because they want votes. But more than ever, we need to know that we're going to be voting for somebody that will vote for us. All right, everybody, have a great day, and can't wait. We'll see you tomorrow and have another great conversation.